Welcome to the Give for Grouse podcast, dedicated to giving the rough grouse a voice by promoting sound wildlife management, advocating for forest health, and championing all things conservation. Now let's get to the show with Cody Altizer and Eric Long. As the intro suggests, this is the Give for Grouse podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Long from Ohio, and my brother from another mother down in Virginia, Mr. Cody Altizer. How you doing, Cody?
I am doing super. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing just well. Thank you for asking, Mr. Altizer. So, things to talk about. I think the most popular thing to talk about now is you and I are trying to find that needle in a haystack, get in a blind, and do some filming. Correct?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. How successful have we been, Cody? How successful have we been?
We're off to a pretty good start. I tell you, it's funny. You think about deer hunting in the rut. Mm-hmm. That's a thing we can all relate to. This time of year, spring gobbler season, nobody talks about the grouse breeding season or the grouse rut. And it's a thing, truly, because, I mean,
the
it's
grouse
spring.
rut. The grouse rut. You know what? Whether the rutcation people say it's a grind. Cody and I are dealing with the grind.
Grouse grind, 2026.
The grouse grind.
It is really cool this time of year because they're just ramping up. Drummers are drumming more and more every day. You see hens out and about. They have to, I mean, it's like turkeys. She goes to him, so it's this cool thing where the woods, if you got them, kind of come alive with grouse. You just got to have your eyes and ears open to them. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. I'm thankful to be a part of it, but we're off to a pretty good start. I got some footage yesterday of a couple birds, as did you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, people like getting footage of this needle. It's filming deer is fun. It can be a blast. Turkeys, sign me up, Waterfowl, difficult to film. Hunting, filming waterfowl as a whole can be very enjoyable, etc. Grouse, it's a minority type of thing to begin with. You just can't go out and film them. Mm-hmm. You got to have them. Then you got to go find the damn things. And then you got to find the logs. Mm-hmm. And then you got to figure out this and figure out that. So every time I know Cody and I see some footage or somebody's picture, you appreciate it because it is like getting up extra early because you don't know where they're roosting or you don't know where they're ground roosting. So you don't know if you're going to be bumping them. So you try to get there extra early. So that way, if you do scare them, they're not apt to just go flying off somewhere. And then you climb in a blind and it's just like, okay, is this the day? Is he going to show up for us? And then when you do see him coming toward the log, or all of a sudden they just show up at the log, surprise you. It's just like I won the lottery today.
Yeah,
it is. It's just, man. Cody and I have said it, beat the drum for it. If we could take every single person and put them in the blind with us and you hear it, you feel it, I will never get tired of saying it. You will do anything for the species. And that's where we're at. And then to see the footage that Cody got yesterday and see the footage that I got yesterday, as in, March 29th. You wait till you see this. I want to show people, but we're not.
It is so much fun.
Not yet.
You described it. I told you it's like the ultimate treasure hunt. It's like every step you said. First you got to have them, then you got to hear one, and then you sneak in because you hear them, and then you got to first you hear them, and then for me anyway, it takes a second drum to pinpoint. It's like he's there, and then you inch every 3, 4 to 5 minutes. You get closer and closer and closer, and then hopefully you can get close enough to see them on the log or to flush them off of it. so where you got a good idea of where it might be, and then the real treasure hunt begins. Because you get the general location, you can be within 20 yards, and then you go to where you think he was, and you look around, and sometimes the log is like a beacon. It's like, well, there it
Yeah.
is. But sometimes you
Yep.
got to hunt for it, and then you're looking,
Yep.
is it a log, is it a rock? Then you're looking at the cover, where would he be, what makes sense, and then all of a sudden it's like, bah, there's the
Yep.
log, there's the droppings, and
Yep.
then that's just finding it.
Yeah.
Yesterday morning, I said it's the end of March. This will probably air in the middle into April, but first morning I filmed one this year. I got in after an arduous walk through some rhododendron, got my camera set up well before first light, got in the blind, got all situated, got my clothes on, kind of took a deep breath to chill out for the hour as I waited till sun came up. And then, so it's pitch black, and then you hear him. He scares you because you're
Oh
10
yeah.
yards away from him, but it's pitch black. You can't see it.
Yeah.
And then he was on the log drumming. I don't know if they drum more frequently in the dark. You ever notice that? Like during the daylight,
I,
it's every
I
3 to 5
have.
minutes, but in the dark, it's there's less time
Well,
in between drums.
he's scared. He's trying to keep himself busy, not think
Keep
of the
himself.
monster.
But then when he's drumming before the sun comes up, you are just begging the sun to come up. It can't come up
Oh,
fast enough.
and then you
You're
turn your
waiting,
camera on,
and then
and the
you're waiting
light's
for him
not
to
right.
stay there. Like stay there until it's good filming light. It's the whole
Oh yeah.
thing. I'm addicted to the whole
Oh
process.
yeah. No, it's a quite. I remember the first time that I found a log. It was before we filmed. I just put a deer camera on it, and I was doing what you said. You take a step, and then you hear,
Hmm.
and you take some more, and hopefully you didn't spook them. And finally, it's like I came up on two logs, and it's like, okay, which one? And I looked at both of them. There was no poop, and I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I'll put it on this one. No, that's what God wants me to do. I'm going to put it on this one. But
Yeah.
no, I know my Lord. He's trying to fool me. I'm going to go back to the other one because he knew I was going to pick the other one. It's just like,
Right.
okay, all right, you can't fool me. And I pulled it off. But anyway, yeah, no, it's my grouse moved to another log, got it set up, put the camera on it yesterday, and boom, this morning he is there at 6 something in the morning, just beating the drum. Love
Hmm.
it, love it, love it. But with all that being said, we got homework to do, Mr. Altizer.
We'll make this quick because our guest is one I'm very, very excited about.
Yes.
Our billboard campaign, which is a billboard that says logging equals healthy forests and healthy wildlife with a picture of a ruffed grouse proudly on his drumming log, is still ongoing. We need just a few more bucks to get this billboard
Let's
funded.
do it.
If you would be so kind to donate, we would appreciate it. Homework item number 2, as always, if you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating or review. Send us a screenshot to prove to us that you did it and you're a truthful, upstanding citizen. We will return the favor and send you a sticker of your choice, rough grouse with a chainsaw or a bobwhite quail with a drip torch. Homework complete.
Homework
Our
complete.
guest today needs no introduction, but we will give him one anyway, because if you're listening up until this point and you didn't read the title, you don't know who it is. But Ethan Tapper,
Mm,
of all people, has
yes.
been kind enough to join us on the Give for Grouse podcast. As we've mentioned, there's some people out there that before we started this whole shindig was on our short list of people to
Yeah.
to talk to, and candidly, Ethan was at the top.
Yes.
Author of an award-winning book. His social media content is top notch. Beyond all that, and probably most importantly, he is, by every true definition of the word, a conservationist,
Mm,
forester, ecologist, steward of land and wildlife, doing it the right way for the right reasons.
yep. Well, I don't want to ruin any of that. So let's just move on to Ethan because that was well said.
Ethan Tapper, how are you doing this fine spring afternoon?
I'm doing so good. How are you?
I am right as rain. It is a quintessential Virginia spring day. We had a nice little spring rain shower. So the grass is green, the birds are
Mm,
chirping, the grouse are drumming, the turkeys are gobbling.
mm.
Spring has arrived in
You,
Virginia.
you guys are a little ahead of me. So I'm up here in northern Vermont. And actually, I was just doing a talk down in Asheville, North Carolina. I feel like I was cheating because I got, 3 weeks ahead of me or something. So I heard a black-throated green warbler and a blue-headed vireo, and I saw some ephemerals popping and some, flowers coming out, and I come back here and we're well away from that.
Yeah.
Still in the throes of winter. I saw my first ephemeral in my place yesterday, a bloodroot. Just like
Yeah.
seeing an old friend. It's like, hey, buddy, it's good
Yeah,
to
those
see you.
plants, the ephemeral wildflowers, they're legitimately cool plants, but also just the fact that they come out at this time of year, it just like makes them the coolest plants in the world.
Yeah.
Love to see
See,
them.
I'm kind of jealous because I got a beautiful. I mean, it's just leafing out gorgeously. Is buck buckhorn autumn out spice bush.
Oh boy.
Got some autumn olive. It's starting to leaf out beautifully right now. It's
Mm.
awesome. Still grass. Still grass is still on a dead brown, but
Still asleep.
Got to catch them all.
Mm.
it's still sleeping.
Mm.
That's
You
cool.
love to see it.
You love to see
It's
it.
great.
Hopefully that stilt grass stays asleep. Ethan, truly appreciative of you coming on and thankful for your time. More than likely, more people know who you are than they know who Eric and I are. But even still, to get this party started, use the introduction of this podcast here to tell everybody who's listening who you are and what you do, where you're from.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me again. And so my name's Ethan Tapper, and I'm mostly a forester and ecologist from Vermont. And I've been doing that. I've been doing that for almost 15 years. But in the last year and a half, my life has changed a little bit because in fall 2024, September, I came out with this book called How to Love a Forest, and then have just been traveling all over the country and a little bit into Canada, talking about what How to Love a Forest is about and in the themes, and doing talks and keynotes and stuff like that. We can talk more about what those themes are and what I sort of talk about and write about. And then another part of my life has become being kind of a social media guy, and leveraging these social media platforms to reach out to people about similar stuff. And what I really talk to people about, is from a place of being like a working forester, an ecologist. I talk about this concept kind of ecological responsibility and stewardship, right? That the fact that as much as we'd like to believe that we can either, do whatever we want to ecosystems and they'll be okay, or that we can do nothing and just like leave them alone and that they'll be okay. Neither of those things are true. And so that's really what I speak to, is like, what does it actually mean to take care of forests, other ecosystems, and this thing that we call biodiversity, right? All the things that live here on this planet, ourselves included. What does that actually mean? And, and the truth is that for most of us who actually, do this every day, the answers to that question are super nuanced and complex and at times counterintuitive. For some people, thinking that we could cut a tree and that could ever be a good thing for a forest is like totally, blows their mind. But that's the kind of stuff that I talk about every day, as actually being these really profound acts of care and compassion for our ecosystems.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've read your book. I know Eric has as well. Obviously, everybody listening. I mean, I say I recommend it, and not that my recommendation means anything, but if I didn't like it, I wouldn't. I might tell you, but I wouldn't recommend it as strongly as I do. Truly, it is a beautifully written book. I think it's something that a lot of landowners, ecologists, wildlife enthusiasts, hunters, however you participate in the outdoors, I think you can relate to it on some level. And I do have, it's not a very important question, but it is a question I am curious about. Bear Island is what
Yeah.
your property's called. Is there any connection between you naming your property and Game of Thrones, or no connection?
Oh, there's a connection. It's funny. I don't always talk about it because I am a little bit worried that like HBO is going to come after me or something. So if you're listening, don't nobody tell the HBO people.
Yeah, they just
But
called us the other day. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, you guys must just,
Edit this part out.
always be talking to HBO. And, but anyway, yeah, so that's where it's become its own thing. So now I don't even think about that connection. But when I first bought this place, I bought it in 2017. And by the way, for those listening, It's not a real island. It's like a metaphorical island. Island is a place name, traditional place name here in Vermont for a place that's just sort of like isolated and on its own. And it was like I really love black bears, and it's just full of black bears and just like black bear habitat that a bear would dream about. And then also felt like this isolated island, and I had it in my head that I named Bear Island from Game of Thrones, from reading the books,
Okay.
and also then watching the show later. And yeah, and then so I was like, it sort of popped in my head, and that name just kind of stuck. It did take on another name now, which is that which came later as well, where um, the money to buy Bear Island came from an injury settlement that I had that I like sort of allude to in the book, where I'm blind in one eye, and I'm blind in one eye as the result of an accident in 2020, and I got an injury settlement for $200,000, and that enabled me to buy this land, 175 acres. And so now I call it Bear Island, like EYE land sometimes too, because I'm like, oh yeah.
Nice.
Granted, I would love to be able to see out of this eye, but I traded it for this forest, and that feels like a pretty fair trade.
Right.
Trade
There you
indeed.
go. Well, I cheated. I listened to the book audio wise because I do so much driving
Yeah.
and to and fro work and then doing surveys and everything else. You cost me a couple minutes. I was late several times because sometimes you would say something and I'd pull over wherever I was, and I would write it down. And
Mm.
I did that one time, 3 times on the way to work the other day.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're writing, and yeah, it's just some of it is very deep and stuff like that.
Thank
Brave
you.
enough to act and humble enough to change. I mean, I don't know where you stole that from, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, I must have stole it from somebody, right? Wait, that stuff doesn't come from, ding dongs like us.
Yeah, right. But no, it's just I could go on and on. And I was like the other day, I mean, I was like 3 times I pulled over. It's like, damn it, I'm not going to get to work,
Yeah.
but I write this down.
That means a lot to me. Yeah. So the story, we could get into talking more about, the habitat or whatever, but the story of writing the book is kind of interesting where I'd never done anything like that before. And I just, for some reason, got it into my head that I was going to start writing, but not to write a book. I was just like, I'm going to write for an hour. I had this time of day, 5 to 6 a.m., first hour that I was awake. And I was just like really good at doing administrative work during that hour. I just felt like I was firing all cylinders. And I just decided I wanted to use that time to write. And so it was just like a low, no pressure, write for an hour. And it became this practice in my life that is now just the way that I start every single day. I was at for the last decade. And a lot of it took a long time. So writing the first draft of the book took 6 years. And then a lot of that was just like teaching myself how to write, and figuring out how I wanted to write about it. And then the publishing process, another 2 years. When I tell people now, when they ask about the writing, I'm like, I think I pretty much just learned how to write the way I learned how to like run an excavator, which is that I just like got in it and I, started like pulling levers, and eventually things got a little bit better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels, when I read the book now, it feels like it's very much of that more early morning time, which anybody who gets up really early in the morning knows it's a quiet time and a,
Hmm.
thoughtful time. And it feels like to me, that's where that book came from.
Hmm.
It's that's really well said. And honestly, I didn't know that. Well, I think you might have mentioned in the foreword or the introduction or something, a kind of a synopsis of that, where you didn't have any intention of writing a book. You just got up and
Mm,
started writing, and then that's kind of what it turned into. As I was reading it, again, I'm not going to pretend like I knew that is how it happened, but there's what you just described being very thoughtful, very quiet. Your writing is very intentional, very honestly, very vulnerable. One thing is what I noticed, and one thing that I would like you to kind of share a little bit more about,
mm,
because again, I think I can certainly relate to it. I know a lot of people can as well. It's this kind of tug of war mainly in the heart, but also in the mind when you're managing land and wildlife. And, you mentioned responsibility and stewardship, and it's, do I cut a tree? If I love a tree, how can I cut it down? If I can love a forest, how can I clear cut it or do an aggressive timber harvest? If I love a deer or any animal, if I say I love it, how can I kill it? It's something I struggle with. I agonize over every deer I shoot, over every tree I cut, almost over every invasive species that I spray. Every
Mhm.
decision is heavy and thoughtful. So I can relate to it. I know a lot of people can as well. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, unpack that a little in a
Yeah.
little bit more detail, if you'd be willing.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what this book became was, the best way I can describe it is that when I would work for the state of Vermont, as a forester, and we would go out and we'd be wanting to do some big action, to create habitat, to help forests be more climate resilient, restore these old growth characteristics, do all this like stuff that is really cool. We would always get this pushback, often from environmentalists, and I would say more of like sort of old school environmentalists, and they would say stuff to us that we would sort of derisively characterize as like an emotional response or emotional argument, where they would be like, you're killing this beautiful tree, you're destroying this beautiful forest. And we thought that it was our job, as natural resource professionals, to respond to that emotional argument with a completely objective, unemotional response, where we're talking about the research and what the facts that we know, and right down the line. And it's an interesting thing about it. I've been thinking about it as a social media guy, because in social media right now, debate is having a moment where there's like these streamers, they go on, debate each other, and they're mostly using this, like, I think it's the Socratic method, where they're like trying to expose that the person they're debating has two contradictory beliefs. It's exposing hypocrisy. And that is a really good way to make someone look stupid, and it doesn't actually change their mind. So, like with these, we'd have these very principled responses to these quote unquote like emotional arguments. And I was like, well, great, except it doesn't work at all. And so there's a reason that those emotional arguments are so powerful. And I think that it's actually, that's the thing, not just like waving a research paper in someone's face, but like actually reaching people on an emotional level is how I think we sometimes get out of that entrenchment and actually reach people. Because I've had such a cool experience in with spreading how to love a forest and sort of like the message of it, which is like sort of an emotional argument for stewardship, active stewardship. And reaching just all different kinds of people, from like the most woo wooey forest bathing hippie environmentalist in the morning, and then old school eighth generation Vermonter dairy farmer in the afternoon, and both of them feeling like this book was written for them.
Mm-hmm.
you know and so yeah, I didn't do that. I don't think I did that on purpose. I think I realized after that that's what I was trying to do. What I was really trying to do was just like sort of express in the moment, express the emotional complexity of like this work, because I don't want people to think that they go out there and they see a forester marking a tree or a logger cutting a tree and thinking that, oh, those people must not care, right? And the reality is that I do that stuff because I care so deeply. And that is actually an expression of that. And I think to your point, Cody, about, agonizing over those decisions, I think if we're not agonizing over those decisions, we're not thinking hard enough about them, because they are really, it is a big deal, and it is a big deal to kill an animal. It is a big deal to cut a tree, and that we need to sort of like do it with our eyes wide open, and then of course do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And do it because we're like, these are big decisions that we're making, and we can make hard decisions, and we do them in service of like bigger, better things.
I think it was like first, second chapter. I remember calling Cody up and I was like, I am so torn with this book so far. It
Mm.
like, and no, I'm take that as a positive thing. Trust me. So I'm Gen X. I'm 52 here in a little bit, but most of my friends are, millennials type thing. And I grew up in a, a farm type, like you said. I'm a farm background, you can imagine the politics and stuff. And then my friends and stuff, Cody's a millennial, and I was back and forth the whole time of the book. And that's when it just kept me going. It's like, yeah. And then it was like, and then it was like, yeah. But it was awesome. It was such a, and I said this to Cody, and Cody, help me out here. I said, the stuff that we are doing, it's like, how do you get that emotional connection with something like a rough grouse that nobody has any emotional connection to and never even seen one, never even heard one? How do you convince somebody like, hey, help us, fight, advocate for the species? And I told Cody, is like, I wish every person that was against what we are trying to do would read your book,
Mm.
because it comes from that place. Like, I can't say what you said because it was, I mean, because you're a forester, you're very in deep with it, if that makes any sense. But
Hmm.
no, and there's not a question in there necessarily, but it was like, it is a book for people that are against wise use logging
Yeah.
and have no idea about rough grouse and stuff like that. So that's
Yeah.
what I.
Yeah. I think one of the things about the way that we tend to like beat ourselves up and beat each other up in this conservation community sometimes, which we
Mhm.
do. It's sometimes we suffer from just not thinking hard enough about what we're trying to do. So like the reason that I struggle far more with sort of these old school environmentalists than I do with like, I don't know, timber industry people or whatever. And I
Hmm.
think that's because there's just a little bit of a disconnect between how big we're thinking about with these problems that we're trying to solve. So like if we think that our job as people who care about forests is just to keep every tree standing and and every animal in the world alive, if that were even possible, those people that are out there cutting trees are destroying the forest, right? And they're doing a bad job. If we think that our job is instead to build a world in which all of our biodiversity can live in like thriving ecosystems that are diverse and have habitat for all of these different species to recover these massive biodiversity losses that have happened on our landscape over the last couple centuries, and to build a world that works for forests, ecosystems, biodiversity, and people, the answer
Mhm.
to that question is really different, right? So, like, I often say, I love trees, but I love forests more.
Hmm.
And sometimes the stuff we got to do to take care of forests comes at the expense of a tree. The other sort of like part of this, I think, is also like deepening our how we even define like what a forest is. Like I think traditionally we're like, a forest is these trees that are here, but of course from an ecological perspective that's not true at all. The forest is this entire living community, right? The trees and also the birds, the bugs, the bears, all of the living things, the soils, the waters, the natural processes that change those all of those things over time. All of that's what the forest is. And that's really what we want to protect. Not just these trees that are here in this moment, but all that stuff. And in this moment, if we want to protect all that stuff, it's impossible to do that without making any compromises or sacrifices or hard decisions. Like it just is. It's too complex. Those ecosystems are dealing with too many legacies of the past, too many threats and stressors in the present, too many scary things in the future for us to just think that all we do is just like leave them alone and everything will be fine magically, and we don't have to make any hard decisions, and that like our hands will be clean and we'll be fine. So I
Mhm.
think sometimes when we have these like antagonistic conversations, it's just because we're operating on a very superficial level, right? Like in the same way that if someone just sees you, you killed a grouse, you know,
Mhm.
and they see that and they're like, you know, now this is bad because we want more grouse, not less, and that grouse is dead.
Mhm.
What we know is happening, right, is that this hunting activity is actually like a really important part of conservation, that it's actually like feeds into it in many different ways, including like helping people be connected with forests and other ecosystems, connecting to them to that land and to efforts to restore habitat for not just grouse, but for all of these other species as well. And what we're trying to do is bigger than keeping every individual grouse alive. We're trying to keep these entire ecosystems alive so that they can have future generations of grouse that are even more abundant and more, of all of the things that we love about these ecosystems. And the same is true for forest. It's like we need to really think bigger. And when we think in this very small, narrow way, it makes us think that some things that are really important are actually like bad.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. I think you might have written that in the book, that you love trees, but you love forests more. And there's something that I've always said about deer when it comes time to shoot one, mainly a doe, that, and then again, in trying to explain to somebody like, well, how can you kill something that you say you love? And then I tell people I care more about the white-tailed deer, talking about the species, than I care about that white-tailed deer, the individual. Not to say that I don't care about the deer that I just shot. I care about it very deeply, but it kind of speaks to the essence of stewardship in that big picture view you were talking about, which, again, to kind of go back to what you said in the beginning, making those hard decisions. And I don't know if you wrote this specifically, but another theme that I took away from the book that you communicated, again, I don't know if in these exact words, but to do nothing, or having this preservationist mindset versus active management or conservationist mindset, this do nothing approach is a bigger act of negligence than active management, or harvesting timber, or killing an animal, or using herbicide to kill an invasive species. And that's something, again, when a doe walks out on that October afternoon, never is it my first instinct to grab and kill. I always have to convince myself to do it. It's something I struggle with to this very day, but have gotten better at it and get it in the back of my mind, in my head. It's like, this is for the bigger picture. This is the right thing. It's a hard decision. Coincidentally, she's going to taste pretty good here in a couple of days as well. Yep. That's another plus. But it's I'm glad people like you communicate those emotions and those feelings as well as you do, because like I said, I can relate to it, and the majority of the people out there can as well. They may not be able to articulate their emotions and thoughts as well. So when they read your words, like you guys were talking about, it's like, oh, I do feel that. That's why, your tree hugging, sun, forest bathing, grounding hippies and your 8th generation timber cutters, like, you can relate to it because you have given them access to those emotions that they may not have been otherwise able to tap into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's just such it's such a way to sort of play a different game. We have this battle of facts going all the time, and then we use different facts, we throw them at each other, we say what we think is true and whatever. And this is just a totally different way to reach people in a way that I feel like is just super powerful, and also, like, I often say, like, around nature, which is a word that I use less and less, nature in air quotes maybe, around nature, people tend to put all of this weird philosophical stuff on top of everything, and I can meet them there, and that's fine, but I think sometimes we talk ourselves into these, holes in the ground. I don't know what. We talk ourselves into these little traps where, like, people have this whole, like, philosophy about nature, and what they think, humans' role in nature should be. And I'm like, guys, this is actually, like, way simpler than you think it is. Right. Like, this thing that you call nature is, like, it's both, I guess it's both simpler and in other ways more complex than they think it is, right? So it's like, this thing that you call nature is actually just like all of these species that exist together in these ecosystems, in my case with the forest, in these ecosystems that are just like put together and held up by these big plants that we call trees. And big hard plants, I call them. And we, and not one of those species cares at all about what you think about them, right? They just want to live. And so people will have these things where they're like, oh, there's a difference between a tree falling over in the woods and a tree getting cut down in the woods. And there are some differences, like a tree falls over, maybe it pulls up that root system, exposes some mineral soil, creates some interesting little, seed bed for species that require some soil disturbance and some dead wood properties that are a little different than when a tree gets cut down, some soil mixing properties that are a little bit different than when a tree gets cut down. But for the thousands of species of invertebrates and salamanders and all these living things that are going to utilize that deadwood habitat, they do not care if a person cut it down or if it fell over on its own. They just want it to be there, right? And so I think that, sometimes we let our philosophies about nature get in the way of us actually doing what we got to do to take care of them, to take care of this thing that we call nature, right? And to take care of all of these constituent parts. And it's an endlessly funny thing, these walls that we build up around ourselves. And it's also funny because, like, when I wrote the book, I was really thinking about these sort of like two polarities that they don't really exist this simply, but it feels like they do. Where on one hand, you have people who just like don't care about ecosystems at all, and they just like treat them like their bank account, commodify them, exploit them, and value them only as like dollars and cents. And then on the other side, we have these people who think that the only way that we can take care of them is just to leave them alone, right? And in practice, like, both of those viewpoints end up with the same thing, which is that we don't do anything to help ecosystems. Business as usual continues, and we continue to lose biodiversity. We continue to see widespread species declines. We continue to see ecosystems collapse all around us. And on one hand, maybe we can feel really good about ourselves as we do nothing, right? If we're like, oh, just leave nature, let nature take its course. But when you go a little deeper and you actually understand what's happening to these ecosystems and how they work also, it becomes impossible to sort of like let yourself off that easy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ethan, I think what Cody and I need to do is put you on payroll, because that way when we're giving a presentation, when we feel like that we're stumbling, we just do left-hander, and then you come in and just take over.
Boy,
brother.
What would your walkout song be, Ethan, if we were to call you in from the bullpen?
When I had this dream, I can't even tell you, this whole, like, writing a book is like such a long, like I mentioned, it's like an 8-year process. Mm-hmm. And I had this dream that I was going to play that song "Real Love Baby" by Father John Misty as I walked out as I was on the book release, the book launch event, and I did it.
No,
nice.
So yeah, but it wouldn't be like one of those cool like baseball closers walking onto the field. It's like lights out, heavy metal. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I am in the world of forestry. I am a bit of a unicorn, in that we foresters, we all self-identify as people like don't like to talk, and like every forester wants to be alone in the woods, and it's just their worst nightmare. And I just feel like at this point, I've talked so much, I could just, if you were to just gesture to me and give me that little sign, I would be able to just talk for 45 minutes without thinking about it.
Well, but with all that being said, and all the speaking that you've been doing, and there's not one thing that you said that I was like, it's spot on. I wish I could articulate it. That's a big word too, Cody. Write that down.
Well, I think so. One thing I've been noticing, especially with the social media stuff, is that like, I don't think I know anything more than a lot of, foresters, wildlife biologists, etc., that I know. Sometimes I think the difference is just identifying what you do know. Yeah. And being like, oh, this knowledge that you regard as being so basic. Yeah. Just sort of pulling out these pieces that are important or that are interesting or whatever. But I do have to say, for communication too, and if there's any folks out there who are like biologists or foresters or whatever who do some communication, I had this experience. So I was a service forester in Vermont. We call them county foresters. I was the Chittenden County forester for the state of Vermont for 8 years. And in that role, I walked in the woods with many hundreds, if not 1,000 landowners. And you would just do this thing where you would like roll up in the truck get out in a place that you've never been before and with a person that you've never met before, and you would just have to figure out how to like figure out what was going on with that forest and communicate to them that, and also what, if anything, needed to be done about it in a very short period of time. So is this sort of like lightning round kind of speed dating of conservation, where you really quickly you figure out how to like figure out what people's values are, what they care about, how they think about stuff. And early on, I would notice that I would say something to somebody and you could just tell they didn't get it. Just,
Mhm.
didn't sink in, not didn't resonate with them. And then you would tell them that same thing in a little bit of a different way, and you would watch it sink in, you watch it resonate. And I started to think, I was like, this is really, really interesting, that we can convey the same information in slightly different ways and have it completely hit different.
Yeah.
And so then I started to think about all of these times I was walking in the woods with a person or with family, that this was like practice. And I was just sort of building up, thinking about different ways to convey information that would make it effective in terms of our ability to communicate these complex concepts. And then I started to get really into doing these public events. So ended up doing like 300 public events over those 8 years, and just figuring out how to help people understand this important work of conservation. Because one of the things is just that it's, for a lot of people, it's just so counterintuitive to do any kind of active management whatsoever. And so then it becomes a lot about how do we sort of like hold people's hand and bring them down this road so that they're well positioned to understand, talking about it in the right way, pacing it in the right way, helping people get to a place where they can understand how even something like, killing a deer, cutting a tree could be really, really important.
Yeah. So you doing those public speaking, the book, um, so far, what has been the reaction of people, like in what you're saying, like in when you're speaking engagements? Are they getting it? Some pushback? Um, I mean, what is it like? What is, because I mean, Cody and I've been in wildlife management for over 30 years, state and private. Cody's a hell of a manager in his own right. I do a lot of speaking engagements and stuff like that. And we're just starting this, Get for Grouse has started in December, but we've been
Mm,
doing stuff for a long time prior to that. But, I to do a speaking engagement about something that's, it's so important. You want to make sure that it's right,
yeah.
at some time. But like what you said, you don't throw facts in somebody's emotion. I
Yeah.
love it. So, I mean, how has that response been with what you're saying?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, this is going to sound I don't want to sound like conceited about it, but
Okay.
I have not gotten really any negative pushback for the stuff
Mhm.
that I talk about. Very occasionally, someone will like come up to me after and say something. Um, Probably of all the things, the herbicide use for controlling invasive plants is the one that really snags some people up. And I think that the book would be more successful if I hadn't put that chapter in there. But
Really?
oh yeah, but
Huh.
cause that's the one that is really hard for people to wrap their heads around, and that whole chapter exists because it was hard for me to wrap my head around, and I wanted to not just make it feel like, oh, we just love herbicide. Of course we don't, and of course we don't like every way that it's used, and of course we can also use it in this one really specific way to affect positive ecological change, and it's the only way that we're going to deal with this invasive plant problem, which is a bummer, and also doesn't have to be a huge bummer because we can use it in ways that are totally fine.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that one I've gotten a couple little comments, but I've done now 200. Since the book came out a year and a half ago, I've done 200 public events talking about it, and all over the North America, and I feel like it's been really positive. And I think there part of that is that again, I spend a lot of time just like communicating who I am and my values. That's also something that social media can do pretty well. Is you can go a little deeper and really show who you are and be goofy and show flowers that you like and birds that you like, and
Hmm.
show all these other aspects to your personality that then make it more difficult for folks to write you off as just someone who doesn't care, you know? And so I do these events and spend a lot of time communicating those values and just trying to make people laugh
Yeah.
and then get into like the heavier stuff. And I think the funny thing about it is that if you pace it right, like this work of stewardship makes all the sense in the world, you know,
Hmm.
and it's like, of course, this is what we're gonna do, right? But then
Right.
it's all about sort of like uh, helping people understand, you know, this taking people down this pathway in this very specific way so that they're positioned to like to understand that.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I have had tremendously positive feedback. I've been super surprised that the book has been as well received as it has by such a cross section of people. Like I really thought it was going to mostly be a book for like, you know, the conservation community
Yeah.
and forest stewards, you know, and folks like us. But it just seems to have a life of its own and just be this book for, I don't know, for everybody. I mean, so that one of
Yeah.
the crazy things is that, you know, I knew that shortly after publishing it, I knew that this book was meaningful to the conservation community. But then it like won the New England Book Award for nonfiction, which I was like, oh, it's just also people just like it as a book,
Right.
which was like pretty crazy for me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
it's been really cool.
yeah. Well, Cody right now is, I think his appointment, he's getting a backpack sprayer surgically implanted on his back because that's all
Perfect.
it's just walk around and spray
Yeah.
barberry,
Ah,
It's
what a
on
life.
a basis. That's
oh,
all he does. There's
I'll tell
certain
you
times of the
what,
year I don't hear from Cody, and I know it's deer season, and when it's rut,
it's
he's
you
either got
know,
a girlfriend or he's spraying. Yeah.
I don't always just because it's not always the right time, but I don't always just really, you know, bash people over the head with the herbicide thing unless they ask about it, which they often do because they'll tell a
Yeah.
story about coming to Bear Island and you know, one of the first things I found there was a 30-acre pure barberry patch, which was so it was in the understory. So there were trees there too, but in the understory, no native plants, just waist high barberry, 30
Wow.
acres. And no one that I know has ever heard of a barberry patch or had ever heard of a barberry patch that size, like a problem like that being solved, right? It's just something that people try and fail. And I was like, you know, what else are you gonna do? I tried to dig it up by hand. I have a story right about it in the book, and I did in a day. I did a tenth of an acre, and I knew that I hadn't actually killed it because I left all these root fragments in the soil, and
Hmm.
mhm.
I was just like, so what am I gonna do? And so then you know started asking around to. I actually hadn't used herbicide that much, or if at all, at that point, and started asking around and finding out that like basically everyone in the conservation community that manages these invasives does use herbicide, but just like is afraid of the optics of it, and
Mhm.
so they just don't say anything about it.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like what I said to one member of a large national conservation organization when I found that out, that I was like, you know, they were like, we do it, but we don't make a big deal about it. And I was like, well, I wish you would, because what we're doing is we're sending this message that, or, you know, or we're not, I guess we're not sending this message about this important conservation tool that we've already figured out. Like, we've asked ourselves questions for decades, like, what's worse, the invasives or the herbicide? And like, you know, the invasives are worse, by the way. And you know, can we apply these things in a way that protects our soils and our waters and our biodiversity? And the answer is yes. So if this is a choice we've made, and we feel good about it, and hopefully we do feel good about it because we're doing it, why are we not being truthful and honest with people and trusting that they can grasp the nuance of this, right?
Hmm.
That this is like us applying fractions of an ounce of herbicide to individual plants is different than, you know, us like spraying herbicide from a plane or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, and or you know indiscriminately sprayed across like a conventional cornfield. It's a totally different thing. And I think that we need to be honest with people, because the goal is not that we look really good all the time. The goal is that we like actually take care of these ecosystems.
Mm.
So anyway, yeah. So with my barberry patch, I got NRCS funding through the EQUIP program. I'm sure you all know about that, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. I've had now two EQUIP contracts plus a CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program contract, which is also through the NRCS. And I just treated it myself, and I spent a summer, and I would just do a day or two per weekend. I was working 4 10s, and so I'd do like Friday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday, or just Friday. And in 12 days, that first year, I pretty well got it. And and then the next year I did 2 days, and the next year I did 1 day. And by 2 years later, the barberry, all those little stems, that is the reason that we have to spray them. We can't use like cut stump application, which I really like. They just all disappeared.
Mm.
It was eerie. Like I went down there and I was like, did this really happen? They were just gone. And then by the next year, it was just a carpet of spring ephemerals, bloodroot, like
Really?
all. Yes, and it was really cool because my buddy Sean, who's an ecologist with this organization called the North Branch Nature Center here in Vermont, we do a course together called Forestry for Naturalists every May. And he came out here, and he had also knew about this story, and he was really didn't think herbicide was a good idea at all, and he was just coming out and expecting to find this moonscape, where just everything's dead, and he just found this understory alive with native plants. And he was like, it blew his mind. Right? He was like, this is, for every single person who thinks that, this is what it's going to be, that we're just going to like use herbicide and everything's going to die and nothing will ever live here again. What a profoundly different vision.
Mm.
And that actually, now that barberry is not there, we can have this understory that's full of all these native plants, and that have specialized ancient relationships with this whole suite of insects that feed these amazing insectivorous birds, and also all of those things. Like, it's pretty cool to just be able to provide them a home, that they can live here again.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, you just answered one of the questions I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you to advocate for the use of responsible herbicides and give us a rundown on how herbicides can increase biodiversity and how it's this effective management tool. And you just answered that. You and I.
Well, it's a fun way I like to think about it now, because I didn't grow up, we ate organic. I'm from Vermont, like we ate organic food, and herbicide was like the enemy. And or at least, we didn't know that much about it, but we were like, oh yeah, this is a bad thing for the world. And now I think of it, when I use herbicide in this way, I think of it as actually an action that's like subversive, because I'm like, here I am taking this tool that was used to suppress biodiversity, right? And instead using it to protect biodiversity.
Yeah.
And it's just, as I write about in the book, it's one of many tools that are like that, not the least of which, by the way, is us, right? We know that human beings caused all these problems, and that also we're probably the best hope of our ecosystems for a better life in the future.
Yeah. There's a lot of situations back home where exact same situation where you wipe the slate clean of barberry, and then you go back and then you see that proof in the pudding type of example is so, as I'm sure you can relate to, so rewarding personally, that your sweat equity was worth it. But then you can use it as a teaching tool, because I've done the same thing back home. It's funny, barberry was my introduction to invasive species removal in 2012, I think. So I've been at it long before killing invasive species was cool. But I remember the second growing season after I hit this real hard patch, I saw a pokeweed stalk through a barberry skeleton. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And then, spraying fescue and then releasing 2 different species of milkweed this past summer. I saw some grouse. Eric, I tell this story to anybody who will listen. Honestly, I hit stilt grass pretty hard on a piece of my property. Saw a grouse hen and grouse chicks walking through an area where I'd sprayed out stilt grass, and it's so rewarding for one because you know you made a difference, and
Yeah.
that's like
Ethan,
you said
Ethan,
you create a home for these, and you know most of, as I'm sure you're aware, most of the now I say most of the conservation community, but a lot of them are focused on game species, deer, turkey, and the like. And I'm of the minority that doesn't associate ruffed grouse with a game species. So you see the spring ephemerals or grouse chicks or these native plants and flowers responding to invasive species work, then it's really selfless work, I think, and then kind of like the essence of stewardship. And I don't know, it's rewarding, like I said, to be able to say, hey, I did this and that happened, and then to use it as a teaching tool, because so many people have so many misconceptions about herbicide use. And I'm glad you said what you said about the the amount of actual herbicide, because it's percentages. So
Yeah.
when I spray stilt grass, more times than not, I spray clethodim at 1% in a 4-gallon backpack sprayer.
Yeah.
So you see me spraying it, and you see this mist, and you see all this liquid, and you think, oh, it's gallons of herbicide. 1% of 4 gallons is just north of 5 ounces, and
Yeah.
that's the entire solution. So it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. Or
Imazapyr, I know, is like, and not all herbicides are this safe, but imazapyr, I think, has the same toxicity level to humans as toothpaste. So it's like you got to trust the biologists and the chemists and the people who design these to again follow the label as everybody says, use them responsibly, and when done so, they're
yeah.
an invaluable
It's
tool.
it's a game changer. I mean, it's like it's again another one of these things that is actually more simple than it seems in some cases. Where like um, with a lot of these invasive plants, it's just like here's this tool, and if you use it, you can solve this problem, and if you don't, you can't. So it's what do you want to do? And I think a lot of people, when faced with that choice, have chosen that they don't want to do. They would rather develop a philosophy about why invasive plants should be here than they would have to deal with this like really uncomfortable decision. But like I've had many times, and it's even more that targeted nature and that minimal nature of this usage is even more pronounced when you use cut stump application. I use this applicator called a buckthorn blaster, which is a bingo dauber, and I'm like, I've been out with landowners and they've been, just trying to, without herbicide, control, like a quarter-acre dense buckthorn stand for a decade and just getting absolutely nowhere. Just like trying to cut it and just making it mad and not getting anywhere. And I'll like look out into that patch and I'm like, I could solve this problem for you with half a shot glass of herbicide in an afternoon.
Mm.
And I'm like, it's not, people think that we're just thinking about like everything dies and it's this huge scary thing and nothing ever lives here again. It's like, this is it can be such a small thing. And, and again, none of this is to minimize like very real concerns about herbicide usage. Like, I think we should take those seriously for real, but it is to say that there is a place for it in this work. And with invasive plants, I don't know how else we do it, really.
Yeah, I seen Cody's place when he started, and it was just invasive, barbarian, and just etc. And him being so diligent, and I make fun of him all the time about spraying because that's all he like. What'd you do today? Sprayed. What'd you do yesterday?
Yeah.
All this stuff. Like I'm afraid to trip and fall, and he's gonna like whip out his backpack spray and spray me. It's just
Yeah.
no. But with that being said, I mean a lot of times when it comes to forest management, I think the unknown. Like I have a lot of clients. It's like you walk their property and you go, "Oh my God!" I mean, like you need to get on a program. You got to help pay for this. You got to figure, there's companies now that will come in and spray, but a lot of people they don't feel. I always tell them like, do a section at a time. Get a win. Find a win and then move
Yeah.
on to the next section. Don't look at your 100-acre property and go, I got to win. No, just get a win, get you motivated, excited to go on to the next spot. But people, it's so overwhelming. I've been on
Yeah.
property that's mostly invasives than it is native. And it's like they look at it like this, I got to just manage the invasives. Like I'll deal with it and justify how autumn olive is great, you know?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Right.
got her. Yeah, but you don't, yeah, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I think it's just so overwhelming to a lot of people. And
Hmm.
the unknown of using herbicide, you go on social media and, there's some Facebook biologist on there going, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then he listens to another Facebook biologist that's like, no, you need to do that. Instead, no one's reading the damn label on the thing to tell you actually what needs to be done,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
and the right PPE and all that stuff.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah. And there's there's a million versions of this, right? It's not just herbicide. It's also cutting trees. To me, a lot of parallels, killing deer, a lot of parallels where there's just, it can be very intimidating. It has to happen, but there are good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. It's very intimidating. It's very difficult to know who to trust. It's very, and a lot of people just, they just end up not doing anything because, they don't know what to do.
Hmm. Yeah.
And one of these things that I think is so important and such a position that I want to be in is acknowledging that some of these same tools that I'm using to do good stuff can also be used to do bad stuff, right? I'm not here to tell you that herbicide is always used well. I think in most cases it's used poorly,
Yeah.
and and it certainly wasn't developed to do anything good, And I think that, a lot of times when people are out there working with loggers and cutting trees, it's done poorly. I was just coming from some parts of the world where it's one of the big things is them just trying to get like a forester involved. So it's not just, a landowner just calling up whoever and going to cut whatever they want, regardless of all of these other considerations of ecology and habitat that we think about all the time. And there's a million different cases of stuff like that. So I think it is important to to acknowledge that nuance and then also to invite people along, to be like, I want to actually, I don't want to pretend to you that this is simple. I want to trust you that this is a nuanced thing, and I'm going to explain it to you, and we're going to sort of go on this journey together, and get to a place where we can be active while also recognizing that what we're doing is really complex, complicated, and nuanced.
Yeah.
Communication, it's such an underlying theme I'm picking up in this conversation, other guests that we've had. It's just a lot of the disconnect between two sides, landowner and forester, or preservationist, conservationist, almost said conversationist. The disconnect is often just a breakdown in communication. And I like how you've said that we do overcomplicate it. At the end of the day, all of this is very, very simple. How we communicate it is very, very important. And I love communication. I love to read. I love to write. I love language. I think it's really cool. As you said, you can say one thing and you can tell that it doesn't stick, but if you communicate it a different way, different pace, different tone, it sticks. How we say and what we say, or what we say and how we say it, I think is really, really fascinating. But it's, as you said, it's really simple. And it's just, it kind of goes back to saying we can, so to kind of pivot a little bit to ruffed grouse and using communication and forest management as an example, say you're on the side, and I don't like to use this analogy or the metaphor of the side of the fence, but say you're on the side of the fence that you're against forest management, you're against logging, you're against the cutting of trees. We understand that ruffed grouse are a young forest species. They need forest management. More times than not, that's most effectively and efficiently accomplished through a timber harvest. Prescribed fire certainly works. But we're certainly not at the place anymore where we can rely on biological disturbances to create their habitat. Going back into that emotional connection, Eric and I always say, if you can sit in a ground blind this time of year, 10 feet away from a rough grouse on a drumming log on a spring morning and watch him preen and display and strut and drum. Don't give anybody any prior context, especially down here in Appalachia, to the state of rough grouse where populations are in sharp decline. Don't give them any context prior to. Take them with you in that blind and you just sit and observe the species all morning. They will fall in love with it. I do every single morning. I fall in love with the bird all over again. They establish that emotional connection. Then at the end of the morning say, hey, populations of this species are in sharp decline. I would bet all that I have, which isn't very much, but I would bet all that I have that that person would say, what can I do to help?
Yep.
We got to log, we got to burn, we got to do this. And then more times than not, most people in the middle, they understand because of good communication, that emotional connection has been made. But I don't know, I can't remember where I was going with it. It's just, it kind of comes back to that example of, well, do we want rough grouse on the landscape? If we do, we have to actively manage our forest. We can choose, and it is a choice. If we choose to not manage our forests, and not just rough grouse, but many songbird species, as I'm sure you're aware, Ethan, the 2025 State of the Birds report, just for eastern forests, 27% of our disturbance-dependent species. Rough grouse weren't listed. It was mainly our songbirds. All those disturbance-dependent species are in sharp decline. So it's like we can have one or the other. Would you rather live in a world where we have rough grouse and songbirds in an actively managed forest? And that may mean cutting down some trees. That may be burning at landscape scale. Or we can do nothing, as you say, but this is what that costs, is that lack of biodiversity. So all that to say, I just rambled, but it just, the communication is important, and showing people what that decision to do nothing costs us and our wildlife, I think is a big part of it.
You know what's interesting about birds is that, and I'm a birder, and not a game bird hunter actually, but I watch a lot of birds, and you know the prize that I get at the end of the day is I just get to look at them, which is actually, by the way, I am a deer hunter, and it does scratch a lot of the same itches as deer hunter, where you hear it singing and you're stalking it, you know, trying to get your eye, and then but then you just get it in your binoculars. But one of the interesting things to remember is that every bird that exists here, that's native to our landscape, stands for or represents a whole suite of different species. One of the interesting things about birds specifically is that if we look at all of our different birds, you know, our game birds, our songbirds, our raptors, all of these species are native to this landscape and utilize an array of specific habitat conditions that are actually really different from each other. So with songbirds specifically, you can identify there are songbirds that, you know, are more closely associated with like older closed canopy forests, that are more associated with dense understory cover, dead wood on the ground, canopy gaps, mid-story, and a combination of all these different things, young forest, grasslands, and a combination of all those different things across the year. And so one of the cool things about that you start to realize when you really like get in depth with birds or with any other aspect of our biodiversity is that, you know, we could say we're creating habitat for ruffed grouse, but what we're really saying is that we're recognizing that what we lack across the landscape is landscape level diversity, which is, of course, not just habitat for ruffed grouse, but habitat for an array of different songbird species, and also different flowering plants, different early successional tree species, different insects that are dependent on those for either foraging or for the entirety of their life cycle. And it's about, you know, more than ruffed grouse. Ruffed grouse can be like a focal species that represents this entire biological community. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of different cases where, you know, I think sometimes we can get a little bit too focused on the individual species, right? When what we really mean is we want to create the entire natural community that, yes, sustains that species, but is also about like so much other stuff. Mm. So I think that sometimes when I'm communicating with people, it's fun to have these focal species to focus on and to like draw this attention around. And then it's also cool to like, you know, broaden that. So when you're out, let's say that you get this person out on a grouse hunt, as you mentioned, and they're watching that grouse, to think about all of the other things that they're seeing, right? All the insects that they're seeing flying through the air, and all the birds that are hunting those insects, and all the herbaceous plants that are in flower, and all the, the insects that have come to those herbaceous plants. Some of our, 300 species of native bees that have come to those flowering plants, and all of these other things. I mean, I think that's a really cool thing about it. I was actually, this was reminding me of when I went out to do a bunch of talks in Indiana and Kentucky. And out there, they have a focal species, which is a tree, white oak. So there are a bunch of different organizations there. One of them is the White Oak Initiative, which has recognized a massive decline in their ability to like regenerate and grow new generations of white oak. White oak is interesting because as well as being a very ecologically important species, it's also a very commercially important species, and it's tied into, so they use it to make whiskey barrels. Whiskey barrels, which are, whiskey, which is this really important part of the culture of that area, especially Kentucky, right? And so people are like, how are we going to recruit this white oak? Well, it turns out that to recruit white oak, to grow that, you have to solve all of these different problems. You have to lower canopy density. And as you're doing that, you're actually trying to restore some of these open canopy forest systems that have been lost from the landscape, like oak savannas, oak woodlands, and open prairies, right? And you need to like control deer overpopulation, control invasive plants, and burn. And the interesting thing about it is, if you were to do everything that you needed to do to grow and restore white oak, this incredibly culturally and ecologically important species, you would also restore habitat for thousands of species of living things. You would restore all of these ecosystems that have been lost from the landscape for thousands of years. Prairies, 99% has been lost, right? And you would also create habitat for all of these songbirds and all of these insects and all of these herbaceous plants and all of these other tree species and plants, shrubs, and at the same time. And so, after hearing folks in that environment talk about what I thought was just an effort to save white oak, I was like, oh, white oak is a focal species. And if we save white oak, we save everything. And I feel that way. I feel like grouse and woodcock, they stand for that with the need to have diverse landscapes, to have these early successional habitats across our landscape. There are other bird species that are, they don't happen to have, I think, the good fortune of being a game bird species, but many other different species of birds that represent other conditions that we need, right? Like we need open canopy forests, and we need these, here in Vermont, we need a lot more of these structurally complex, multi-generational closed canopy forests, which is what many of our forests were like prior to colonization. And we need beaver wetlands, and we need, bogs, and we need all of the dry oak forests and sand plains and all clay plains and all of these other, niche environments for all of those things at the same time.
Yeah. So with all that being said, and this may or may not be a difficult question. I was listening to you and thinking of this question at the same time. If Ethan was in charge, like how do we solve these problems? Let's just use the rough grouse, okay, for conversation.
Yeah.
How do we solve the issues of the rough grouse? Like, how does Ethan? How does he fix the timber industry? How does he find markets? How does he plug this hole? How does he plug that hole for this species?
Yeah.
Like, it's a very difficult question. This is one that Cody and I battle all the time. Because, like, I probably going to annoy Cody with this response, but when we first started this, it was like, oh, we just got to promote logging and it just blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, we're running out of fingers to like, oh, you need to address that before you address this. And this needs to address. Ethan, talk to me, man.
So this interesting. I'm going to answer this on the fly because I've never been asked this question before. So there's a few different aspects of it. One aspect is that it really doesn't matter what we do, as if we can't stop deforestation and habitat loss. So this is a thing, like we get so concerned with like the habitats within the ecosystems that we have that we forget how many tens, hundreds of thousands of acres of habitats we're losing completely forever every year. And that is a question that is harder to answer because it's outside of like our conservation community. It's within like our governance community. And we have to figure out how we're going to supply all the things that we need at the same time that we're protecting our ecosystems. And so what this means is, you know, that we have to at some point protect undeveloped areas, and hopefully at the same time that we recognize we have the need for like more housing in a lot of areas of the country and stuff like that, create measures to concentrate development within already developed areas. And it's really hard. Like in Vermont right now, there's a bill that's trying to go through our state legislature called Act 181, which is an attempt to sort of update this kind of seminal but outdated land use planning law we have called Act 250. And it's trying to do exactly that. It's trying to increase protections on undeveloped areas and actually make it easier to develop and to concentrate development in already developed areas. But then, of course, you have hundreds of people showing up on the steps of the State House because for the people who live in those less developed areas, you're like, well, now you're taking away my land rights, you know, and there's a million other critiques as well. But I don't know how we get out of this if we never at any point tell somebody that they can't do anything they want to do, right? Even if what they want to do, build one house, you know, here or there, one more long driveway, one more whatever, like we've done that. We've tried to do that and it just doesn't work for our ecosystem. So that's one part of it. Another part of it, and it really made me think about it because I was just in Asheville and Pennsylvania, and I've been in places like New Jersey, and like, I think we need to be candid about the fact that our forest products industry is dying. Yes. And we don't want to, and nobody wants to admit it, and we all want to say, oh no, we got this cool thing. It is dying. And it's dying largely because we're having a hard time competing in these global markets. And you know, what we're seeing is we see these patterns, especially in low grade markets like pulp. We see these patterns of consolidation, and then they go out of business. And so they consolidated, you know, and so we saw all of these big businesses go under one umbrella, and then that one umbrella business goes out of business, and we lose everything at once. And the thing that's concerning about that is that we need to recognize that the forest products industry is important for ecological reasons. Like, we know that it's important for economic reasons. Like, of course, we want to be able to produce wood, which, by the way, is a local renewable resource. It's actually kind of hard to imagine a better sourced resource than wood, right? It's just there's all these nuances of like how we get it. That's the devil's in the details. But you know, like in places where there is no forest products industry, we just can't do forest management for anything at scale. We can't do forest management for wildlife habitat. We can't do forest management for fire, you know, mitigation purposes. We can't do forest management for climate change stuff. We can't do forest management for anything. Like, and so, you know, we end up being like, if the first time I realized this is I went to New Jersey, and in New Jersey, the first thing that all these foresters told me is they're like, you know, we have like no forest products industry. No mills, no markets, no loggers. And what this means is that if you want to do anything, you're either going to go and get an NRCS grant, which is extremely limited, you know, federal grant, or you're going to have a deep-pocketed landowner just pay for it to be done. And the result of both of those things is that instead of doing any of this work for all of these things that we want to take care of out there, the golden wing warbler is a big one that drives early successional habitat creation. We do a teeny little bit, and that's it. And I'm like, I'm doing with loggers, with cable skidders, small equipment, and chainsaws, doing more ecosystem restoration at scale, one forester, than the entire state of New Jersey Department of Fish and Wildlife. And the reason is because I can make it commercial, right? So that because we have these mills and these markets, I can get a logger to go out there, and each logger might manage for me 200 acres. And every acre that I'm managing for climate resilience, and I'm managing for habitats that are underrepresented across the landscape. And I'm managing for all of these different things. And we're generating income and generating local renewable resources, right? And so I was like, holy smokes, the fact that we have these markets is what allows everything to happen. And so I think that we really need to like, I don't think that we understand the value of those markets correctly. And so the other part of that too, and I have a book that's coming out in October, and I'm writing about it in this book where I'm trying to sort of like take back the term environmentalism and be like, okay, so let's actually think about if we were going to do this environmentalism thing, but let's think about it a little bit harder. How would we actually not just like leave ecosystems alone, but if we have to actually live here? And we want to, have societies that like have access to resources and that can build homes and that have energy and, all of these different things that we need to live. Where does it come from? Like, let's actually think about where that stuff comes from. And it's hard to imagine a resource that's better than wood, right? That we can harvest at scale from ecosystems. It's not a farm field, which is like, an ecosystem in exile. It's like an actually fully functioning ecosystem. And we can harvest it in ways that actually like benefit that function and restore habitat for species in the midst of a mass extinction event, right? While producing local renewable resources that have all these economic, and cultural benefits. And it's like hard to imagine what could be better than that if we were to actually vision out like the world that we want to live in. And so that, and so now I've gone off on two tangents.
No, you're fine.
In answer to your question, but so then the final step in this, so we've got protecting, reforming the way that we think about development, and protecting, these undeveloped areas as best we can, concentrating development. And then the other part is standing up these forest products industries, which, by the way, like, when we had back in whatever when the tariffs hit, and there was also around the time this executive order that was like, go get all this wood. And it sucked because it does make sense to use our own wood supply. We do want to do that. But unless that's accompanied by like a generational investment in workforce training and in standing up these forest products industries of the future, there's like nothing we can do about it. Like,
oh, I see what you're saying.
Like we just have lost the capacity to actually produce wood at scale, and we lose more of it every single day. And so like if that executive order was accompanied by that kind of like a investment, it would have been really, really, I think, a positive thing. But it was just sort of like, go get more wood, and so it didn't really change anything for us. But so the last part of this is that then we have to think about how we actually manage the forest that we have, right? And I think that there's a lot of different ways we can think about it. And is this response getting too long, or is this okay?
No.
Don't stop.
I just wanted to interject.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Stretch.
No, there's one comment, and please keep going. And sorry, Cody, to rob it, but
Yeah.
do not misinterpret my passion as anger. Okay, so that's my
Sure.
I'm listening to you, and I'm just, man, I want you to be the spokesperson. That's such a good. I get so, because Cody and I, we've been saying it for years, way before Give for Grouse and everything. It's like we know more about wildlife management than ever before. Ever before. And it's so black and white. When you manage wildlife, managing wildlife is easy. It's when you throw people involved in it. That's the stick. And I just get so frustrated. I'm listening to you, and it's just like, yes, like yes. I'm going, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, no, that's it. Yeah. And it's so frustrating. I'm getting so upset and pissed off now because you know what? You want to be radical. You talked about environmentalism. You want to be radical? You want to be like these kids and stuff like, hey, I want to be radical, whatever. Hey, be pro-forest, ecology.
Yeah.
You want to be radical. You want to be different amongst your friends or whatever. Pick up a chainsaw. Do something for wildlife. That's radical.
Yeah. Well, and I would say
if
that
you want to do this for that, know the effing facts, man. Be
Yeah.
educated.
It's
Sorry.
easy. It's easy to see it in black and white. Like for me, and this is like a lot of what the book is about. The really radical thing is to have a nuanced perspective about it, right? Where you're like, actually these polarities don't exist, and actually it's not black and white, and actually we need to develop like these more nuanced views about what we're doing here. And so, and then the last thing I would say too, the piece of this puzzle is that then we need to think about how we're going to support the management on the lands that we actually have. And I think with respect to like the forest products industry, we talk about it as a triad model. So if we want to have all of the ecological, economic, cultural benefits, biological benefits of functional forest ecosystems, and we want to use forest products, there's this old concept, which is an oversimplification, but basically we need to have some unmanaged reserves and some industrial forests where trees are managed as crops, and then some of this sort of middle category where forests are managed for this plurality of different benefits. And the interesting thing about the triad is that there are places where they've collapsed parts of this. So New Zealand is the classic example of where they only have unmanaged reserve and industrial forest, which is kind of sad because you're like, neither of those allow you to actually like engage with trying to help forests have healthy ecology. But the thing about these three categories is that they're in relationship with each other. So like if you say, I want more unmanaged reserves, you also need more industrial forests, right? To supply that same amount of benefits, those economic benefits, that those forest products. If you say you want fewer industrial forests, you also need fewer unmanaged reserves and more of this middle category, right? And so it's interesting to think about those three things together. And I think the middle category is the really cool one, because that's the one where we're recognizing both the benefits of producing these resources and the benefits of active management, and also the benefits of ecology, right? And we're taking action when necessary to support these landscapes that are providing for us, providing recreation, they're providing food, they're providing resources, they're providing water, they're providing, beauty and all of these other things. And we're taking the steps necessary to protect those things when we have to and when we have opportunities to. And so I think that the people who really understand this the best, of course, are like the biologists and the ecologists and the foresters and the people who do this work every day. And so one of the things that I've tried to do for folks, as I go travel all over the country and get to talk to people in ecosystems that I fundamentally don't understand, and they ask me what to do, is I'm like, I have these bigger concepts for them, but really, I'm like, I'm so glad you asked, because your conservation community, where you are, has been waiting to hear from you. When I worked for the state of Vermont, I was, it was government agencies and nonprofits and land trusts and all these different organizations that were like always scratching our heads being like, how do we get people to engage with us and volunteer with us and come to our events and follow us on social media and read these resources that we created and watch our videos and all these different things. We couldn't figure out how to do it. And now I feel like all anybody asks me is for those kind of resources that, no matter where you are in the country, your local conservation organization is full of these people who actually understand those bigger concepts, and so I love getting to shout out, my friends and colleagues who are biologists and foresters and all these other things who have in-depth knowledge of wherever they are that, only they can have, really. And so then at some point, empowering those people who have that deep knowledge to, inform the management that takes place on the ground. I have actually, with respect to ruffed grouse in particular, the ditch chickens, as they call them in Maine. You ever hear that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody just here calls them partridge.
Partridge, yeah.
Partridge. But so they I carry an endorsement from Audubon, and it's an Audubon Forester endorsement. It's a pilot program in Vermont, in New York. There's only I don't know if there's a dozen of us, but we carry this certification specifically for foresters who manage for bird habitat. And one of the things that we do is for every parcel that we manage or write a forest management plan for, we zoom out and we take a 2,500 acre snapshot of the area around the parcel, and we assess the proportion of different forest types within that area. Right? So you're now seeing not just the conditions within the parcel, but the conditions outside of the parcel. And I did a forest management plan like this last year where you look at that, you do a desktop analysis with ground truthing, and you're like, oh, we have 0% early successional habitat within this 2,500 acre area. And where I am, we want 3 to 5%. And so then you talk with the landowners and you're like, do you want to create this habitat? And there's this place that would be perfect for it because there's all these old field white pine trees that are dying, and we could just put in a patch cut right there. And I like the idea of thoughtfully and intentionally like having professionals who are, both working on a small scale, looking at these individual forests, and then zooming out and seeing these landscape level views that afford them the ability to see and then to like implement management on this scale.
I tell you, it's so nuanced, as Eric said. Ethan, I'm not sure if you're aware, he's a forester. I think he's from New England-ish. His name is, I don't know his name.
Is it Tom Wessels?
No, it is not. It is, he wrote a book. It is called, it's somewhere here, Silent Saws and Empty Homes. I think Zachary Lowry.
Oh, I've never heard that one.
Sound like I will.
It sounds like a forester's name, but I don't know it.
Yeah, it's a very nuanced book about. I'll follow up with you to make sure I'm giving you the right name. The book is Silent Saws and Empty Homes, or the inverse of that collection of words. But I read it recently just because, as you guys were talking about, that the whole situation is so incredibly nuanced, and I love to learn all the intricacies of it and what influences markets and decisions. And I would recommend it if you like to read, or if you're like Eric and you're in the truck a lot. I'm sure it's an audio book as well.
Can I tell you a quick story that just reminded me of?
Sure.
You betcha.
So when I was working for the state of Vermont, one of the job of us county foresters is we manage town forests, municipally owned. So it's like public lands at the smallest scale. And I managed about a dozen of them, 5,000 acres. And at the same time, I was doing this forest management project on this town forest and managing for all the best stuff in the world. And at the same time, there was also a forest management plan for this huge state forest, 50,000 acres, that we call the Camel's Hump Management Union, around this mountain called Camel's Hump. And at the same time that I was doing this work, all these folks were litigating and suing the state for this forest management plan that's supposed to be so bad and so evil. And of course, it was really good management for all the same things that I was managing for on this parcel. But so I did a walk that included people of this opposition group that were like suing the state for this forest management plan, and they came with me on one of my forest walks, and we just had this discussion. And one of the things that I do is I usually start with making an argument for the work that we're doing solely on ecological grounds, like the just like these are the conditions we're creating, these are the habitats we're creating, this is what old growth forests are like, this is how we're using forest management to even make this forest more like an old growth forest sooner. And then you get to the log landing at the end and you're like, as if it couldn't get any better. At the same time we're doing that, we're also generating these local renewable resources. And if you prime people for that moment in the right way, everybody's like, wow, great. Whereas if you had taking them up to that log landing where there's that big scary diesel skidder and those logs piled there at the beginning of the walk, everybody would have just shut down, freaked out. But we went through this whole process, whatever. So after that walk, I had people from that opposition group come up to me and say, why don't you have those foresters that are managing the Camel's Hump Management Unit up there do the kind of forestry like you're doing that's so good, this ecological forestry for all these good things, these habitats. And I looked at them and I was like, they are. That's what the plan is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They
it was
are.
just, to me, such a profound statement as to the importance of how we talk about this stuff, because the only difference between what I was doing and what they perceived that the state was doing on the state forest was the way we talked about it, you know?
Yeah.
And then and just that difference was enough to turn opponents into allies, which is, I think such an important thing that we have an opportunity to do at such a larger scale as we as everybody here wants to do, which is to just restore awesome habitat
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a somewhat similar story, and I'll make this really brief. I got one of the wildlife officers. I work for a state agency, and one of the wildlife officers, he bugged out. He said, "Hey, can you do a talk for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll fill in for you." And what he set me up. He didn't want to talk to these people. So when I
Mm,
walked in there, I was like, "What are we talking about?" He goes, "Whatever you want." And I'm like, "Okay." Bikes show up, and it is like 20 something people of the opposite opinion of Eric Long right there.
mm,
Oh
yikes.
my! I knew exactly what he did to me, and I'm like, yeah.
Mm,
So I'm like looking around the room, and everyone's staring back at me, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. How do I do this? So I stuck my hand up my butt, and I pulled out some greatness. I said, I said, hey, and again, I'll make this quick. Hey, in a show of hands, how many people love wildlife in this room? And all of them, of course, rose their
mm,
hand. I'm like, look, I love wildlife too. We have something in common. Who would have thunk,
mm,
And then I was like, well, what if I told you, with that being said, I went into Mohican State Forest, which is a popular forest in our area, and I did some clear cutting and some selective cutting. How many people in this room would want to hang me? Like you would try to get me fired? And be honest, all of them rose their hand. I said,
mm.
wait a minute. I thought you said you loved wildlife. And then I went through the biology of it, like 60, 70% of wildlife needs early successional young forest. And I just started delivering not facts like you were saying, but getting them emotionally attached to the species that they loved. And it was like at the end, all but maybe one or two out of the 20, which there was no way you were going to change their mind, thanked me. And it was all the delivery, what you did.
Mm,
Okay. Like we're
mm,
all doing this, you know? And I told them, I was like, not to bring politics in this at all. When you do wildlife and you talk about the truth, you got to leave your political beliefs on the shelf for the time being. Like when you manage wildlife and forest, put that aside for now, okay? Just for a little bit. Then you can go back to doing whatever you want to do or whatever you want to believe. And they got it. Well, whether
mm.
they left and it's still with them is another thing. But it's all the delivery, it's all the messaging. But that's why I laughed and I thought of that story when you said,
Yeah,
you should be doing it. Well, they all
yeah,
are.
yeah. Well, and it's like, and two, it's like a lot of times it's sometimes breaking down that people think it's just like, in all capital letters, wildlife, and it's all capital letters, logging. And then it's our job to break down like which wildlife, what do they need? What do they eat? Where do they live? Exactly, and what is logging? Is logging everything from cutting every single tree on 100 acres to cutting one tree an acre over 100 acres, and of course that there's all these nuances in how these different concepts that are applied that are really, really important. One thing that I really that is something that meant a lot to me. When I became a birder, I have this area here at Bear Island. I call it the clearing, where I have this it's like the only open area on the whole forest. It's like 5 acres, and I manage it as like a low bush blueberry barrens and a meadow,
Hmm.
and it's full of birds, of course, in bird breeding season. And when I started to learn about bird biology, I realized that male birds have territories, and they defend them. And so at a certain point here, it would be like in later May when those territories are all sorted out. If I hear a common yellowthroat singing in this one zone of the clearing, I know that that's not just like some common yellowthroat. That's an individual bird. His name's Pete.
Pete.
And And if I hear, and then I walk 50 yards and Pete's territory ends and, Paul's territory begins. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's cool to sort of like break it down where you're like, these are not these like amorphous concepts or these, sort of like nebulous concepts. These are like specific animals that need specific things to live. And we're approaching how to create that habitat in like very specific ways. And so I'm like, it actually made it more impactful to me because I had done all this habitat work around the clearing. And I'm like, oh, I didn't just make it so there could be more quote unquote yet common yellowthroats. I literally created the means for this individual animal to live here, and these are the things that he eats, and this is exactly where he nests, and this is what his territory looks like, and for me that sometimes sort of like it helps to take these big confusing concepts and just make them a little more real.
Mm. Yeah.
It is.
It's like those grouse walking through that stilt grass, Cody.
Exactly.
Where the stilt grass used to be. You're like, oh, this I think about it as the concept of grouse utilizing this, but this is actual literal grouse with their babies.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was a very specific spot because it's right beside our 2-track, and I spray stilt grass all summer, but this spot was right beside the road that I had done. So I saw the chicks in 25, and I was really hard on stilt grass on this piece of the property in 23 and 24. And I set that spot aside because, as I'm sure you know, stilt grass persists in the seed bank so long. And I just kind of wanted to every year monitor and evaluate the response and see how many years from that little spot. I mean, it was big as my office here. How many years would it take to eradicate it? And yeah, lo and behold, last year, the end of May, drive the side-by-side right up to it, stop, get off, just to stop and look and see. And then I can take you to the exact spot, and then right in front of me, maybe 10 yards in front, my eyes go from right to left. I was like, well, that's weird. And I first thought it was a squirrel. I was like, well, that's not a squirrel. And it was a hen. And then the chicks were behind her, but it was just a very cause and effect type of example, and really rewarding and meaningful. That especially for brooding habitat for chicks, for grouse chicks, is like what used to be a sea of stilt grass is now bare soil, umbrella plants, wing stem, snake root, woodland sunflower, some black cohosh. And it's like, and again, not to anthropomorphize, but it's like I did that for them. You know, and you apply that best you can to a landscape scale. And again, you don't, not to humanize the animals, but in a way, you like kind of want to circle back to how I described your writing and being very vulnerable. Aldo Leopold was similar. We have to be vulnerable, and the best conservationists, we make decisions. We have to make decisions with our heart if we're honest with ourselves. Making those hard decisions. So, I don't know.
At the end of the day, too, like those decisions where it wasn't an easy decision, where you actually like did have to put in all that work, and you probably came back and there was more stilt grass, and you came back and there was more stilt grass. And I have a story about that in my new book about that experience with ramps, with wild leeks, and just like everything that went into restoring this whole area. And then like here it is, and it makes it even more powerful because you love that area enough to do something about it, right? And to persist, even as you got smacked down and smacked around and beat up and failed and all these other things.
Yeah.
It's always this big picture view. Eric and I talk about it. Wildlife management, never about the now, always about the future. And kind of goes back to what you were saying about you love trees, but you love forests more. And to be, to, I guess, brag on the three of us and people like us, to be true stewards of land and wildlife, you have to, it's a very selfless approach and lifestyle if we do it how it should be done. Because there are parts of my property, Eric's familiar with it. It's middle-aged pole poplar that was cut pretty aggressively before we owned it 30 years ago. right now it's grown out of young forest. The timber isn't merchantable. The habitat is okay. So it's in this weird middle age where it's not great wildlife habitat. It's not great timber to do a harvest, but this is where I manage for grouse specifically. And it's like, if there weren't, grouse didn't mean so much to me spiritually, and I didn't feel so connected to the species candidly, and if they weren't present there, I would just let the timber age for another 20 or 30 years, get a bigger return on my investment when I do a cut. And it's a beautiful forest, but the best thing for it now is to kind of reset that biological clock. And then it goes back to making those hard decisions. I'm all about it. I understand the response that we'll get and how the wildlife and the native plant response that we'll get. But even still, I struggle with the decision to do it. My family, brother, mom, dad, understand, the ecological benefits a little bit less. So it's this decision that I wrestle with to this day. And like I said, it's tough for me to pull the trigger to do a cut now, but it's less about the now, more about the future. I got to look at the health. I know we don't, not being so single species specific, but thinking about rough grouse specifically, that forest is aging out of utility very, very quickly. This forest, I have to look at it less what it is now, less 5 years from now, but you got to make decisions 5 years from now and envision what the forest and how we manage it's going to look like 5 years from now, 10, 20, 50.
Yeah.
All that to say, it goes back to having that 30,000 foot view of our land, our wildlife, and the decisions that we make. And sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and swallow your pride and pull the metaphorical trigger.
You know
But
what?
before you answer that, Ethan, let me quote the great philosopher Ethan Tapper. And it says, I quote what Cody just said: "The future belongs to the people which have the courage and compassion to do what's necessary, even if it breaks their hearts."
Yeah.
So true.
Right.
It's like it's the weird thing that, we can do hard stuff, and that to me is really what How to Love a Forest is about, and why it's called that is because those are the actions that are truly, in my mind, these profound expressions of love. Not doing what's easy, right? If we were like, as, if you have a child or if you have someone else that you love in your life, those true expressions of love are when you do these things that are hard for them, right? And you make these compromises and these sacrifices, and that's the same thing that we got to do for our ecosystems.
Yeah.
And I think that, in the case, one of the hard things about stewardship is just like you mentioned, Cody, that it's like, you got to make these tough decisions, and you have to have this humility with them, and also courage, because you gotta just do your best, and you will fail. You will do stuff and it will not work, and that doesn't mean that you need to stop doing stuff, and it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. Like, this is just the nature of stewardship is you have to, go out to that area where, you tried to regenerate aspen and it didn't work out, and you got to take a deep breath and then you move forward.
Yeah.
I think that if we're just afraid of doing the wrong thing, we'll just never do anything. And that will still be the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more time you have, and kind of wrap this up a little bit because I'm sure you're busy, but I have a couple questions real quick. One serious, one not. First one's not really serious. It's more of a technical. It's been killing me. I wanted to talk to somebody that probably knew what they were doing, and you're it. Stilt grass. Now we know where, Chinese, or excuse me, American chestnut blight. We know all that, came from overseas, all this stuff. What in the HE double hockey stick, the stilt grass? It's like 6 years ago, there was nothing, and all of a sudden, boom, you log, you have it. It's everywhere. It's basically my yard now. I mean, where, I know that it came from probably overseas, but like where, what, how do you deal with this in Vermont? Do you have it up there? It seems it's just a plague. I mean,
Yeah,
other stuff than that.
You know what? Want to know something funny about Japanese steelgrass? We don't get it. We don't have it. I mean, but so it's something that I mostly encountered in my travels, and people like you, Cody, that are like, met some folks in Indiana who are just on it, on top of it. It's a problem, and I'll tell you what, it's especially a problem in these open canopy forests where they're trying to regenerate these really diverse understories, oak savannas, oak woodlands, places like that.
Yeah.
Because that is even more directly competing with all of these herbaceous species and native grasses and stuff that they want to grow out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not unlike many of the other invasive plants that we have, where it's like, just it comes on really fast, and it just seems like it's everywhere. And I don't know enough about the species except to say that it's actually, it's not that dissimilar in terms of its resilience and how long it sticks around to this species I'm dealing with right now called garlic mustard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which has a over 10-year viability of the seed in the soil, where it's just, you just gotta persist,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and you just gotta be there, and the trick of it is really just your personal resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And with that garlic mustard, I'm like, I go every year, and I'm like, I'm here as long as you are, buddy. But it's hard not to get depressed. But it's also like, again, the only species that how depressed we are has relevance to is us. Right?
Right.
Like, so, you being depressed doesn't have anything to do with the very real ecological harm that's caused by those species and how they really do prevent the conditions that many of our native wildlife species rely on to live. So it just is up to us to continue to be there. And also, like, that doesn't mean that if something's not working, that we just never change course and just be bullheaded about it. Like, we should also be trying to, like, if we're really not making any progress, be like, okay, well, let's take a step back and think about if there's a better way to do this. Mm-hmm. Right. And, is there a way to use some of the other tools at our disposal to solve this problem? And there might be times when, we can. I know that some forest managers, not in Vermont, but in other parts of the country, use fire for a lot of really interesting purposes, both to restore fire ecology, but then also sometimes to solve these like more acute problems, or, better position themselves so that other treatments like using herbicide can work. But it's, it might just be you take a step back and you're like, yeah, I am using the best tool that we have. Mm-hmm. And I just have to continue until it's gone. Well, but it can, if it feels like it's never ending and it's depressing, it's because it is. And yet, I'll be back dealing with that garlic mustard again in a couple weeks here.
Yeah. Well, the non-serious part of the question was, and it's the elephant in the room. I can't believe we haven't addressed this yet. Your punk rock band, like,
oh yeah,
what is that all about?
Oh, I just I sort of accidentally ended up starting a punk band when I was not in college, but in my mid-20s, and so I was actually just telling this story where I was in like a rowdy old time band in college, two of my best buddies, and it just kind of like, or three of my best buddies, and it just kind of fizzled out and didn't like the way it ended. And then I just wanted to do something totally different. So I just started making music like on my computer, and the music that I ended up making had a lot of backing vocals. And so we were trying to put it, figure out how to make it performable. And then it just ended up, all my friends joined, most of whom are not like virtuosic musicians. They're just wanted to be in a band. It was like the energy of like when you're a little kid and like all the kids in town, whatever instrument they play, get together and be like, we're starting a band.
Yeah.
And then there were just so many people on stage. It's a 10-piece, it's so many people on stage that it ended up developing that punk energy. And it's a really important part of my life. It's just like, we're all old now. And like,
yeah,
we don't tour around anymore, and
Oh,
but
you
it's
went
the
that far with it. Like you were, I
yeah.
mean, you were, no way.
But so we yeah, so we just basically play mostly around Burlington, Vermont, and which is Vermont's biggest city at 60,000 people,
Mm,
and
shout out.
and we just do it because it's just like an important part of life, you know. And it's the only thing in my life that I do that's not about forests. I
Yeah.
manage my forest, manage other people's forests, write about forests, talk about forests, make videos about forests, volunteer on the board of the local land trust, taking care of forests, and then I do this one other thing that's totally different. And we know in ecology that diversity is very important for resilience, and so I think that's
Mm,
true for us too.
cool.
Absolutely. Well, this has been super, Ethan. I'll be honest. I didn't get to a lot of the questions I wanted to talk about.
Dang.
Yeah.
Gosh, I was hoping to ask you a lot more questions about the technical side of forest management, healthy forests, habitat, all that good stuff. But want to be sensitive of your time. We'll wrap this up. We do ask all of our guests one question before they leave. I did have two questions, and you may have already answered one of them. First one, all the work you've done on Bear Island, what's been the most meaningful project that you've talked about or that you've done? Like for me, spraying the stilt grass, then seeing
Yeah.
grouse hen and grouse chicks. What's something you could point towards?
I think the well, I'll say two different things. I think that the dealing with the barberry is pretty mind blowing in terms of like a forest that completely it's just a forest without a future. It was just done. It was dead. As soon as those trees in the canopy died, it was just going to be a barberry shrubland forever. And now it is something that is so different than that, and it's remarkable. I'm so proud of that. And then, but there was also something with birds that was really maybe the most like when it really hit home to me how we can do this thing was when the first thing I did at Bear Island on an acorn year, was have these whole tree loggers come out and cut 15 acres of patch cuts in like areas that were 100% unhealthy trees because it had been really badly high graded and there was basically no healthy trees at all in huge areas of the forest. It was crazy. And I did it on an acorn year, planted tens of thousands of acorns, and then you just wait. And there's this bird species that is called the mourning warbler, Mourning. And it is what's called a fugitive bird species, which means it has low site fidelity, doesn't come back to the same place every year. It ranges across the landscape looking for forests that are 7 to 10 years removed from a catastrophic natural disturbance.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, well, I guess in 7 years, mourning warblers will be here, haha. And it was 2024, and I'm like out there just marveling, spring migration, just listening to all these birds, and I hear a bird, and I was like, what's that? Never heard that one before. Open up the Merlin app, mourning warbler.
No.
That's cool.
And I was like, and I've found that again and again and again. It's this, birds are like, if we build it, they will come.
Yeah.
They're just waiting for us to create the habitat that they need to thrive. And there's been that same ecologist I was telling about, Sean, who's Beckett, who's a birder as well. He said that Bear Island is the place where he has never heard this many mourning warblers in his entire life. They are everywhere.
Awesome.
And that part was really, really cool.
That is cool. Birds, you and I are, pun intended, birds of a feather. They are a great metric by which to measure our management success.
And just so powerful, such a powerful like communication tool and thing to rally around. I was just, and then you just get obsessed with them, and there's nothing else you can think about. Like
Truly.
I was just designing some new merch for my website that says it has a picture of a chimney swift, and it says, "I am politely waiting for you to ask me about birds."
I like that. Well, that's cool. To piggyback on the bird topic, the one question we ask everybody is about ruffed grouse. And again, kind of just to hear people's stories, help everybody listening to establish that emotional connection. Down here in Appalachia, they're a little different than what you guys have up there in terms of just their visibility and how often you're able to see them. Down here, if it's a flush, they're in and out of your life in a matter of seconds. So, your most meaningful and special, memorable experience with a ruffed grouse.
Oh,
Good
wow.
one you can point towards.
Yeah, I love, we have a local Audubon organization, Audubon Vermont, that I've become very connected with. And just all the people over there are so great. And I always go in May, and they do their birdathon, which is like it's like what we call, a big day where you try and go get as many birds as you can in a day. And it's also this fundraising thing for them. And I just hang out just for the company and just to hang out with other bird nerds. And we were walking back. We weren't even like actively birding. And a ruffed grouse posted up on a log right beside the road, the forest road we were walking on, and started to drum.
Oh, man.
And so number one, I don't know that I had ever actively seen one with my eyes drumming before in real life. I've heard them, thousands and thousands and thousands of times, but I don't know that I've actually in full view been able to see one drum. But imagine that excitement, plus you're with 30 other people that are just obsessed with birds, and we're all just can't believe what we're seeing on this day right in front of us. It was remarkable. It was so exciting.
That's awesome.
That is so cool. It's like he knew you guys were coming. It's like, all right, fellas.
Right?
Watch
If
this.
we had staged it, it couldn't have been better.
Yeah.
Oh,
You the
man.
grouse.
That's right. Yeah. Release the grass.
Release the grouse. Oh, shoot.
Right on.
Thank you, Ethan.
It is truly my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, appreciate it.
It sounds like you got some more questions for next time.
I do.
Well,
Yeah,
hopefully there is.
I hope there
There
is
you
a
go.
Offer.
second
Yeah.
time.
Would love to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got a
for
lot
sure.
of more of the nerdy habitat
Yeah.
species type of questions. But this was phenomenal. Truly appreciative of your time.
Yep.
Good.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. My pleasure.
Alrighty, sir. We will look forward to you on part 2 whenever we can make that happen.
That sounds great. Yeah. And just, if folks out there want to, go check out some of my stuff, check me out. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. My handle's at How to Love a Forest and at EthanTapper.com. And the book's called How to Love a Forest.
Highly recommend Ethan,
Yep.
the social media, the book. As Ethan said, follow him on all the social media platforms and read the book or listen to the book. You will be a better conservationist, a better steward of land and wildlife as a result. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you so much.
Well, we coined this terminology in the episode with Jesse, the stretch stamp of approval. Did Ethan Tapper earn the stretch stamp of approval?
And then some, right?
Right.
I mean, come on, man. I mean, that was, what is that? That was, I could sit in a lecture and listen. And it
tell
was
you.
actually, I'll be honest with you, Cody, I was getting frustrated because I'd like to think myself as a very good public speaker. It's one thing that I will be arrogant about. I'm good at talking to people in the public in seminars. And I'm listening to him and I'm like, I'm not that. Damn it.
Well, it's different.
There's
I
like,
mean,
man, he's
it's
dropping. He's like
relative.
got me ready to just go. It's frustrating. Like I am not good at my craft yet.
No, it's like, Tom
Talk me
Brady
up.
or
Talk me
Aaron,
up.
Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers both could win you Super Bowls. One just
Yeah.
you do it differently. I thought the same thing. Like I said in the episode, I love language. I love communication.
Yep. Yes, you do.
Try to be I speak slowly, but I speak thoughtfully because words are that important to me. So like when I'm speaking and it sounds like I'm speaking slowly, like I am right now, is because I'm hunting for the right word because words mean that much to me. And I always try to pick the right one. How we say things, what we say, how we say it, so important. And again, there are levels to it. You have some people who can talk a mile a minute and they can talk a pig into a ham sandwich, and then there are some people who, like me, who speak slowly, but hopefully can accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
Ethan, he just has this ability to so thoughtfully and purposely and beautifully, if I'm honest, communicate his thoughts. And, this conversation obviously was about forestry and wildlife and forest management. And like you said, just what a spokesperson to have for what we represent, to have somebody who can so eloquently communicate what we advocate for. We should consider ourselves as a community. Ethan mentioned it, as a conservation community. We should consider ourselves very fortunate to have his voice.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, like I said in the podcast, I remember saying it was like a chapter in, or even the introduction. It was like, I want this guy. And I told you, it's like, I don't know what the rest of the book is, but now that I got the rest of the book in me, it was like, I want him. I am so, yeah, like you said, I want him on our side. I'm glad he is on our side, because I mean, he can speak to, I don't know, those people in the middle that we need. There's a left, there's a right, there's a people in the middle. If you want politics, there's the people in the middle are the ones that you need to talk to.
Yeah.
And man, can he talk to them?
Yeah.
He did a great job in his book, on that. But he was, I don't know what kind of person I thought I was going to meet because of the book, but I'm glad he agreed to come on our show, man.
I
was
am
awesome.
too. We had never communicated with Ethan prior to this, and I'm like you. You read somebody's book and you get a good idea of who they are. Watching their social media stuff, you get a good idea of who they are, but you don't know who the person is. I mean, before we hit record, I mean, I felt like the three of us had known each other for a long time. The conversation it was seamless. It was easy. He's a very likable guy, very easy to get along with.
Yeah.
And like I said, a great voice for who we are and what we're advocating for.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, everybody, I can't remember exactly what all his stuff was, but go check him out on social media. He has, not every day, but almost every day, he has some type of story on his reel, or or his Instagram, or excuse me, I just butchered all that, but yeah, you know what I mean. And then his book, How to Love a Forest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do the audio thing if you're driving, if you got time. To read the book. I'm sure reading the book is a lot better than the audio, because you become more emotionally involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to yell at people while I'm driving and listen to what Ethan is saying. But no, man, it was great. That was awesome. That not to keep rambling, but that makes me want to work harder listening to him.
Yeah. Well, that's inspiring.
Yeah, it was, man. I want to work harder. I want to be better. Man. But no, any last words?
That's all I got. Like I said, I'm through the roof with our conversation, but I didn't get to any of the questions I wanted to ask.
No, not at all.
I want to talk to him about
Not
habitats and species and forest composition and managing forests for different diversity and different wildlife. But we'll have to do a part 2 where we get into the more nerdy stuff. This was fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. So with all that being said, go check out Ethan Tapper. Thank you for always supporting the Deer Hunter, or excuse me, Jesus, I will never get rid. That's so hard to not say. Thank you for supporting the Give for Grouse Initiative, and also listening to the Give for Grouse podcast. As my grandpa always used to say, no hurry, keep moving.